I learned Italian in less than a year without classes, without tutors, without studying grammar. And I'm going to tell you how I did it and how you can do it too. This was the year 2020. I was living in Berlin. I had just moved to Berlin to work in the Spanish embassy there. And I I didn't know anyone there. And I started looking for events online. I was already into languages. That was 4 years ago. Well, time passes quickly. Uh, I started looking for events to socialize, meet people, and so on because I was working in the economic and commercial department of the Spanish embassy, and everyone else was Spanish there in the office. Uh, and I didn't want to spend my free time also hanging out with Spanish people from work. I didn't move to Berlin for that. So I started looking for events and opportunities to socialize. And one of the things I found was an German Italian language exchange every Sunday in a cafe there. And I thought, what the hell? I speak German. I don't speak Italian, but I probably can learn it pretty quickly because it's so similar to Spanish, right? And decided to join. And the first time I realized that, yeah, I could understand quite a lot of Italian when people were speaking to each other, but actually speaking it was much more difficult. In fact, I couldn't say anything. So I decided to keep going to those meetups to actually learn Italian, to take it seriously. And the first thing I did, I had already discovered input, the church of input, and I was that was my believer phase. So I started listening to podcasts in Italian a lot. Uh, Here's this massive input reading and listening. I did a lot more listening than reading, to be fair, to be honest. Um, I had a lot of commuting time in Berlin, so and then I also work out a lot. There was nothing better to do because of COVID as well later on. So I started doing a lot of listening, and it worked. My comprehension improved very quickly. It was already pretty good from the beginning because they had similar languages, right? But very soon I could understand basically everything. And I was starting to speak a little bit as well, but I was still struggling with it simply because input doesn't prepare you for. It helps speak better. Obviously, if you do a lot of input, you learn expressions and you learn your pronunciation improves and you learn vocabulary and so on. But in order to get good at speaking, you need to practice speaking. And at some point, I came up with the idea. I saw one of the guys, an Italian guy, who was writing stuff down. He was taking notes. Vocabulary. His German was pretty bad, and he was there to practice his German. So it was a language exchange, right? And I noticed he was taking notes, and he was like, "So what are you doing?" And he was like, "Everything I'm not able to say, I write it down, and then next day I'm able to say it." And I thought, "Oh, that's a good idea." So I started doing the same, but instead of single words, I thought I might as well write down full sentences and prepare entire sentences about a specific topic. And that's where later on I discovered that this is called the language islands. I read Boris Shechtman's book. I don't remember the name. It's very good on language learning, and there he calls it language islands. This specific technique, but back then I didn't know of that book's existence. I saw that guy doing it, writing words that he would have liked to say, but didn't know. And I took it one step further and started writing sentences. So each time I took notes on what the topics were, conversation topics were. So if people are talking about, so where are you from? And I'm from this city and that city, and then okay, and then a bunch of questions. How do I ask them about the city, and how do I talk about my own hometown? And I took some notes, and then at home I prepared 4 sentences about that specific topic. And each time I would take more notes and prepare more sentences. So each time in conversation, I would do better because I could say everything that I prepared from not only from the previous session but all the previous sessions, because this was weekly, right? Well, except COVID times, there was some times where yeah, the place was closed, but I kept doing it anyway on my own, preparing topics. And I didn't hire any tutors or anything like that, but you can always come up with topics for conversation. If not in Italian, you still have conversations at work, right, or with people in the street or whatever. You still can think of, you still can take notes from any daily activities or conversations you have and prepare sentences in the target language for that. And that's what I did. I kept listening to podcasts, really important. Uh, Not really important. Once you understand the language well, I don't know if it's really important to continue listening because once you understand well, if you stop listening to anything in the language for months or even years, I don't think it matters much because you already understand everything. Um, you, I think speaking practice is more important once you understand well. But I kept listening because it's easy and content was interesting as well. I found a couple of podcasts about history that were really interesting. Um, One in particular was Storia d'Italia. I've stopped listening to it recently, but yeah, I have other stuff to listen to now, I guess. But it was about the Romans and Eastern Roman Empire and the Huns, and it was late antiquity history. It was really interesting, and I would listen to that on the way to work and back. Uh, Again, lots of listening, really helpful, but at some point it's just once it becomes so easy that you yeah once it becomes really easy, I don't think it's that helpful to continue reading and listening. It doesn't hurt, but it's not the same as preparing sentences and rehearsing sentences for speaking. If you do 1,000 sentences a day of listening and repeating, that will help your speaking a lot more. And what I did a lot was the language elements. Prepare my sentences and repeat them aloud, and then use them in conversation when I had the chance. If I had to do it all over again, what I would change is the input. The input was really, it did help me get really confident with Italian quickly, and because it's an easy language, I ended up understanding the language very well, very quickly, and uh, and it was just a low effort thing to do. Keep listening, and I'd read a couple of books as well, but um, it was an easy thing to keep practicing the language, right? But you get, I think, the return on investment if we looking at time spent. Uh, I would have done more language islands and more listening and repeating drills and more translation. I didn't do any translation then. I just read the sentences over and over because that trains your output a lot more. Yeah, but uh, yeah, you live and learn. This was 4 years ago. I I was in the middle of learning how to learn languages. I was pretty good at learning languages back then already, simply because I would work really hard. In fact, that year I improved my German even more. I learned Russian, I learned Romanian, and I learned Italian that year. But basically, spent all day doing nothing but learn languages outside of work. Work out, socialize a little bit, and learn languages. That was my life in Berlin. But yeah, basically, what you should take from this is that for a language that is not very difficult, like Italian or Spanish or anything like that, you should start with input, start getting a lot of input. If you don't know the vocab, then memorize. But if it's easy enough and you're not a big fan of memorization, just do input and then prepare sentences. Lots of sentences and practice saying them as much as you can. Uh, 10, 15 minutes a day of drills of language islands, repeating sentences over and over again, and then listening and repeating as well. And that will prepare you for conversation because the input will help you understand, and the deliberate practice with the language islands will help you speak. Input and output, you work on both. And that's it. It's not that complicated. This will work in reasonable time for Italian, French, Portuguese, uh, any Romance language. This will work very well. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, give it a like and subscribe and all that.